Joy. Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Pure Joy podcast. And this is your host, Elaina Love, and I'm here with Caitlin Louise. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, and I'm also going live on on Instagram. So for all you
Awesome.
followers, we're doing a great podcast today, and you're getting in on the inside.
Hi, Insta peeps. We love you. Yeah, so for those of you guys who just started, maybe you're watching on Instagram right now, or this is your first episode that you're either listening to on Facebook or on iTunes, or you're watching us on YouTube. Either way, this is part 2 of a 3-part series we are doing, and this is the 3 pillars of pure joy, like how to have pure joy in your life. And this really kind of relates to not just food, but all aspects of life. Last week we talked about balanced nutrition, which you can reference, and we'll put a link in the show notes for episode 42. This is episode 43, and this week we are talking about satisfaction. Next week we will be talking about mindfulness, which is our 3rd pillar. So let's get right into it, Caitlin. Let's talk a little bit about about satisfaction today.
Definitely. Well, I just want to say too, with our 3 pillars, we're really focusing on women who maybe have autoimmune conditions, or they're struggling with losing weight, or they have hormonal imbalances, which these kind of sometimes all tie together. So if you have one symptom, you usually have another, but things like skin issues, brain fog, poor digestion, and just detox in general, and of course like anti-aging practices. So that's really where we're getting at when we're talking about these 3 pillars and who we're really targeting here.
Yeah, and I do want to say one thing that you said that really I want to go into more detail on is when you have one issue, let's say it's eczema, or let's say you're breaking out in a skin rash and you're like, why is this happening? It's never localized. It's never like, oh, this one area of my skin has a rash. Let me put an ointment on it. It's always the entire system. So like you said, Caitlin, when you have autoimmune, there's so many more things going on. It could even be menstrual cramps could be tied to your diet and to something else underlying going on. And that's why we're all about the holistic person, holistic nutrition, holistic thoughts, holistic, mindfulness, just like all aspects of it, and really going deep into what's going on with you in your life at this time. And so satisfaction plays a big part of it. And I was thinking about it today, Kate, but satisfaction isn't just about food satisfaction. Um, it's about connection. So for me, I notice, because I do a lot of cleansing, I do a lot of fasting, I do a lot of balanced eating, but there's times when I feel like I'm overeating, and I'll be eating food like late at night that I'm not hungry, and it's not really even tasting good to me. And so this morning I was thinking about, well, what makes me do that? And usually it's when I'm feeling disconnected from my friendships, when I haven't been seeing people enough or haven't been being out and being social. And since I'm single, I have to pay extra attention to making sure I'm getting those connections in life, whatever they are, reaching out to friends on the phone, or somehow getting satisfied in other ways in life.
Mm-hmm.
And this can be huge for people. And I know that I'm really tapping into something here.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's a big part of why we touch on satisfaction on all areas. Like our 3rd pillar is mindfulness. It's like getting healthy and, reducing inflammation. All of these things have so much more to do with, just our quality of life in general, the people around us, what we're putting in as far as nutrients and just substance of people around us. So I totally agree with that one. And what we really do love to prize ourselves on is our recipes, which we do focus a lot on food, and our recipes are known to be like super duper satisfying. So a lot of diet practices or protocols are very much focused on you're restricting calories, you're restricting yourself from certain foods. So even though this is an elimination diet protocol, we're still feeding you things like breads and cookies and brownies and chocolates and all of these things that you can make that are super delicious, and you can make them right at home.
Yeah, and that's really an important part of it as well, is making sure you're not feeling deprived. And we go over and over this when we do our courses, but deprivation only leads for most people to binging. And binging is just a sign that you're somehow feeling that you're not getting enough. Like I just mentioned, in some area of life, it could be emotional, it could be actually physically. So we just got an email yesterday from someone who had just done a cleanse with us, and she said she did really well, and then she started to feel really like she wanted to binge after the cleanse, and she asked us, you know, what's going on? Why do you think I'm doing this? And my immediate response, I really like tapped into my intuition, but immediately what came up was, you're not getting enough fat in your diet. You're not getting probably enough protein. Your body wants to be nourished. And so when we start to binge, we have to look at what am I missing as far as nourishment? Like, how can I fill in these gaps? And the biggest two are protein and fat. And the other aspect, we'll go through all of them, but the other aspect is flavor. You know, you got to make sure you're getting, like you said, Caitlin, like these breads, our keto bread, or these tortillas that we make out of like psyllium and almond flour and coconut flour. You got to make sure you're getting a replacement. It's never about just taking away. Nature abhors a vacuum, which means you have an empty hole, it's going to want to fill it. So you got to make sure you're replacing these foods you're eliminating with something delicious and amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what we like, because for me, the first time I tasted our keto rolls, which was an amazing recipe that we created that's all vegan, you know, all the good stuff, it was like this huge hole, like you said, was filled. And we really like to teach people how to do this at home because, yes, there's alternatives to, you know, gluten breads. There's lots of gluten-free rolls on the market now. But it's just not the same. It doesn't give you that same satisfaction feeling because it's usually full of sugar or full of processed flours, which rice flour, potato flour, those are all going to actually increase your cravings and increase your need to want more. Whereas like the rolls that we make are full of fiber, so they're help keeping you satiated longer. They're full of protein with the nuts and the other stuff, and they're just overall satisfying because they kind of hit all of those texture, flavor, and, you know, all the bells and whistles that you want in a bread.
Yeah, and I do want to say something about the bread alternatives that are out there. Like, oh, I ate a gluten-free bagel today. Like, I feel good about myself. Well, you can actually be doing more harm than good because a lot of those gluten-free products have garbanzo bean flour in them, and the garbanzo beans have not been sprouted. They don't take the garbanzo beans and sprout them and dehydrate them and grind them into a flour, which is what I would do at home. But when you're out there in the world, they're just taking raw garbanzo beans, which everybody knows you should never eat a raw bean because it's going to make your stomach have actual physical pain, and it feels like you swallowed a brick. So, you know, don't be fooled by a lot of these gluten-free alternatives out there. They can sometimes be worse than the original, like the original bagel. So that's why we are really big proponents of making your food at home. And I know you can't always make everything at home. So today we'll talk a little bit about what you can have when you're out to satisfy those cravings, but also just making sure that you are, one thing we teach in our courses is you pick one day a week. And I love this now. Like my freezer is full of frozen bagels that have already been sliced in half, ready to pop in the toaster, that I make out of sunflower seeds, sprouted pumpkin seeds, some psyllium, and a few other ingredients. And we also have like a flatbread. Anyway, my freezer always has that in it now because I know when I want something warm and hearty that it's there and ready for me. And I'm not going to make a choice that's unhealthy for me, such as there's like a lot of things on the market now, like the cassava chips. There's a company called Siete that's selling these amazing grain-free chip alternatives, but we also can't be fooled by like overeating things like that. Like that's fun for a treat every once in a while instead of corn chips because it's made out of cassava root, which is still has carbohydrates, but at least it's not corn, at least it's not GMO, and at least it's not full of mold. But the more, and I don't want to sound like a downer, but the more that these kinds of products, like let's say cassava, become popular, the more shortcuts cuts get taken. And then you'll notice like, oh, this company that I really like, their cassava chips, well, now the oil tastes a little rancid. Maybe they're overusing the oil. And that did happen with Siete for a while, but in their defense, I want to say that they have switched back and like they must be changing out the oil more often because for a while I could not eat their chips because they tasted like rancid oil. And I'm like, oh, they're not changing the oil vats, but now they taste pretty good, and I will have them from time to time. But like you mentioned this, Caitlin, like not having stuff in your house that's going to cause you to go down that rabbit hole of eating too many carbs and eating the wrong foods and feeling like you're sabotaging yourself.
Mm-hmm. Tell that to my partner. See if
Love
they
sabotage.
which, yeah, you're totally right. It's way better than corn. There's definitely worse things out there, but you can always overdo it. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's good, better, best. And we talk about that too. Like cassava chips are better than, or they're good because they're better than like corn chips. And then like, if you want to do even better, make your own. And then if you want to do best, like you find out what works for you and the exact amounts. And that's something that's taken, like, so Caitlin and I, we both have been doing this you've been doing it for over a decade. I've been doing it for over 2 decades. We didn't just wake up one day and go, I'm now just going to be 100% give my body exactly what it needs in every moment and never overeat and never do this and never do that. And in fact, today, even still, I still have my times when I'm like, oh, I probably didn't need to eat that at 10 o'clock at night or eat that much chocolate or whatever. Like nobody's perfect, but you do, like, for best, I would say you just do find that there's things that you just eliminate for good. Like for me, gluten, never, ever. It used to be a sometimes, and now it's a never ever because I know the downfalls of it. And there's certain foods in my life that I'll just never eat again. And so only you know for you what's right for you. But I also do want to say that a lot of it has to do with satisfaction again. So the reason we're eating corn chips or chocolate is because in some area of our life, we're not feeling satisfied. Mm-hmm. And so I just want to kind of get into more of the tips, like how to reduce your cravings, our top 5 tips, and ways that you can make sure that you're not getting sabotaged by yourself in those weak moments. We all have weak moments, especially women that are menstruating. You know, you're on your period and like suddenly like this monster comes out that just wants to eat anything and everything that's in sight. And so like we got to make sure that we're supporting ourselves ahead of time. Like future self is going to thank past self for getting everything ready for you, right? So let's go through, Caitlin, the top 5 things of how to reduce cravings. The first one on my list is coffee. And that's like, we have our morning, what we call Superwoman coffee, and we fill it with nutrition. So for me, like I always put in either MCT oil or coconut oil. And we talked about this last week, so I won't go into a lot of detail about it. But I put in the nutritious medicinal mushroom powders and some fat. And then that way I'm like, it's 11:30 now here where I am, and I'm totally not hungry at all because I have my coffee that has a little bit of these medicinal properties in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the number one things a lot of our clients tell us on our coaching program is they do feel satisfied, and the reason is because of the flavor of these foods. Like they're flavorfully satisfying. And for a lot of people, they've never used some of the spices that we give them in these recipes, which is also really exciting. Like, you know, last week we talked a lot about herbs and how good they are for your digestion. Well, we use a ton of these and they really help with satisfaction. So the second of our top 5 tips for reducing cravings would be make sure your food is really seasoned and you're using lots of spices that naturally have sweetness to them or naturally have, you know, a lot of punchy flavor or even spiciness. And salt is so good for us, and all those minerals in like the Celtic salt or the real salt is the 2 salts that we use. We don't use any other of them because they have the most of those essential minerals in them. And those minerals actually help balance our blood sugar. So not only is it satisfying, but we're getting a balance in blood sugar so we don't have as many sugar cravings. And a little pinch of salt, like it enhances all the flavors and especially sweetness. So like our secret ingredient in our smoothies is pinch of salt because it heightens everything.
I love that. And there are people probably right now saying, well, I heard that salt can raise your blood pressure. And they are showing over and over again in science that if you're using a mineral salt and you're eating a low carbohydrate diet, that salt is not an issue. It's usually an issue for people that are eating way too many sugars and way too many carbohydrates. So if you're cutting back on your carbs and your sugars, salt should not be an issue for you at all, especially with the mineral salts. And Do you have a favorite seasoning that you like to use, like a go-to seasoning, Caitlin?
For me, I like the chili seasoning blend. I use that one a lot, or just like an Italian herb blend. That's kind of my go-to, and turmeric, I guess. I do.
For me, it's cumin. I love cumin on my salads, and I'll put that in my, like if I'm cooking up some mushroom and onions. And the other one is onion powder. I feel like onion powder is one of those foods that no matter what I'm eating, I put onion powder on and I'm like, unless it's sweet, obviously. I put onion on powder on and I'm like, oh, it's better. And then one more is miso. We use a lot of like chickpea miso that's soy free. And that can, like when I'm making my macadamia nut cheese in the blender, I'll throw a scoop of miso in, and that really makes a difference in my overall umami. And umami is the sixth taste, and it's tied to satisfaction as well. And that's what's in meat. So if you are doing a mostly plant-based diet and you're not eating as many satisfying meats, then the things like miso and mushrooms and wheat-free tamari are going to really help satisfy those cravings for things.
Yeah, I love how much you use onion powder. I know so many students at your academy are like, a tablespoon of onion powder? Like, I'm used to a quarter teaspoon. So I think too, the part with seasoning is using enough. Like, don't be afraid of these things. Of course, with things like cumin and cayenne and stuff, put a little in and then keep tasting it and see how you like it. But with like garlic powder, onion powder, like really make sure you're getting enough in there. And if
Yeah.
you feel like it's lacking something, put more of the seasoning in there.
You know what's one of you when you got me hooked on was Dijon mustard. And when I lived with Caitlin, I would watch her squirt mustard on everything. And I do it now too, because like I'll be eating a salad and I don't have a salad dressing already made, even though I have tons of great recipes for salad dressing. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, I don't feel like making a dressing. So I'll drizzle a little olive oil and then just a big squirt of Annie's horseradish mustard, or one of the mustards that has apple cider vinegar. There's another company, or a great company called Primal Kitchen, that sells a really good Dijon mustard that I have in my fridge. And that is just so satisfying because it tastes like salad dressing, but it's good on so many things.
Well, and two, I feel like I don't crave it as much anymore. And I feel like our bodies are so, they have so much inner wisdom to it. And when I was doing so much mustard, I felt like I really needed that sulfur. Like my body was craving sulfur. And sulfur is one of those minerals that can get overlooked because usually it comes with like a pungent or bitter taste. Like radishes have a lot of sulfur in them. And for a lot of people, they're just like way too spicy or pungent for them. But that sulfur is so good for balancing all of our other nutrients in the body and so good for our hormones too and our skin. So I think there's a reason why I loved mustard so much.
Yeah, and it does switch. So pay attention to that as well. Like I want to just hit on this topic just a little bit more as far as flavoring and foods, because there'll be phases where I go through where all I want is tahini. And then I'll be like, oh, I haven't thought about tahini in like 2 weeks. Or all I want is dulse, which is a seaweed. It's a purple seaweed. And I actually was thinking about it yesterday, but I don't have any because I can't seem to find any in the local stores. But anyway, our body will start to tell us what it wants. And then just as quickly, it'll be like, oh, I don't really want that anymore. And on sulfur foods like that, I am really into sulfur foods, obviously, lately, because I'm putting a tablespoon of MSM in my water every day, which stands for methyl sulfonyl methane, which is a form of sulfur. And my body just must love it. But I also still am craving radishes and mustard. And cabbage sometimes I think about too, like, oh, maybe I'll shred some cabbage, which is also high in sulfur. Onions are high in sulfur. Garlic is high in sulfur. So just, honor these cravings if you're really craving something. And this is where you don't want to deprive yourself. This is where you want to go hog wild, because seasonings and spices are free foods. They don't have carbohydrates. Of course, like a cup of onion powder would probably have some carbs in it, but in the amounts we're using it, you're not really getting any calories or carbs or anything really. So this is where you get to go, free reign and just try out some different spices. And in our courses, we actually offer you whole lists of spices. Like cinnamon's a big one for me. When I make my coffee, I always sprinkle it with cinnamon because it just makes me happy. And, someone just gave me some cinnamon sticks and I'm going to brew up a big cinnamon tea. And then because it's wintertime, when I come downstairs and want something, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just have a cup of cinnamon tea. And so, like really giving yourself plenty of those flavors.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Yeah. And what's our next one?
Our next one is eating enough fat and protein. So this is really important for keeping us satiated, and especially if you're having a lot of sugar cravings, but you're restricting everything except for the sugar, like you're going to continue to have those sugar cravings because your body isn't getting what it needs and it's searching for something. So do you want to touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, and that is so. Those of you maybe watching on Instagram right now don't know that we teach a what we call a keto gone green, which is plant-based keto. We're not Caitlin and I are not 100% vegan, but we teach a program of going vegan for at least a month and doing these foods. And one thing is to get plenty of fat in the form of coconut oil, olive oil, almond butter, tahini, avocado oil, MCT oil, the omega-3 fats like hemp seeds, which I love to sprinkle on my salads or blend into my cheeses. We got flax seeds, we got chia seeds, and these are all prolific in a lot of our recipes that we teach you, like in our breads and in our porridges. And, so you're getting plenty of these fats. And I can always tell when I haven't had enough fat because I start thinking about it, like, oh, I want an avocado. But when I have had enough fat, I'm like, oh, I haven't had an avocado in a day or two because I'm getting enough fat in the form of olive oil in my coffee or just my different ways I'm eating fat. So again, when we're getting enough fat, then we're not craving it. We're also not craving sugar, and we're not wanting to overeat because we're satisfied. And so when you're on a keto diet, what's great is you don't have to calorie count. Like a lot of people still think, oh, even though I'm doing keto and my carbs are really low, so carbs would be between like 30 and 60 net carbs a day, which means your carbohydrates minus the fiber that's in them. And when you're got low carbs, you're not turning on that craving. Every time you eat like a piece of fruit or anything with high carbs, you're going to turn on like the craving center in your body. But fat doesn't do that. So you can eat all the fat you want. You don't have to worry about calories because weight gain usually comes from carbohydrates. And this has been proven over and over again with people on the ketogenic diet. And it's not only for weight loss, it's actually for brain function. Again, our brains are 60% fat. So feeding them fat is the perfect food for us. And, we're getting all of our different omega fats, and it's just awesome.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so next time you have a sugar craving, eating half an avocado with some mineral salt on it would be really good. I do find that a lot of people think they're eating enough fat. Like, for example, my mom, she's like, oh, well, I have olive oil every day. Like, I have it. I'm like, yeah, but how much do you have? Do you have a teaspoon or do you have a tablespoon? So yeah, not being afraid when you have a big salad to really just go crazy with that olive oil, and you'll notice a huge difference.
Yeah, or when you're doing like roasted Brussels sprouts or roasted, low carb veggies like zucchinis and things like that, giving plenty of oil on there, olive oil. And I get my olive oil from a club, so I'm making sure that it's fresh pressed and super clean, not laced with any other kinds of oils. So check into your fats and where the quality of them as well. And we're not going to go into a lot of detail because we've already talked about that last week. But the next one in that line is getting enough fat and getting enough protein. Now, protein in the form of vegan foods, like you mentioned a minute ago, Caitlin, is in the form of things like sprouted nuts and seeds, or green vegetables have a lot of protein in them, especially things like sprouts, growing your own kitchen sprouts, which we talked about last week, like alfalfa sprouts, or I have fenugreek sprouts in my fridge right now that I sprinkle on my salads. But seeds as well, like pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds and chia seeds, and all the seeds are really great sources of vegan protein. And then spirulina, which we went into great detail on last week, so we won't really go into that again, but huge amount of protein in spirulina as well. Mm-hmm. And then for your non-vegan, I do want to cover this because not everybody listening is vegan. And so if you are going to eat protein that's not vegan, just making sure it's high quality, like wild-caught salmon. And if I'm eating salmon, a lot of times I'll just buy the wild-caught canned salmon, and that's really convenient and easy. And then I'll use eggs. I'll do poached eggs that are from a local source here in Bend. We can buy them at natural grocers from a local farm that has their own free-range chickens that are humanely raised. And so like you can find whatever that is for you, but sometimes when we're not getting enough protein, people's hair actually starts to fall out. and they really do get malnourished. So don't take it lightly if you are vegan. Really make sure you're getting your protein needs met in the form of vegan proteins. And if you're not vegan, then make sure you're getting your protein needs met however you need to do that. And it's not about overeating protein, but it's just making sure that you're getting enough in the day.
Definitely. I notice a big difference when I have something protein rich in the morning. The rest of my day seems to go a lot better. I just feel a lot more balanced along with that fat. So that's a really important one to remember, because a lot of us, we seem to skimp out on the protein and just focus on the other two macronutrients.
Yep. Like a smoothie is a great example. So in our course, we have this mesquite magic smoothie that it's keto, and we have a couple other really great like Love Power and green smoothies that we give people in the course, and they're packed with things like spirulina and hemp seeds. And when I make those, if I, like you said, Caitlin, like I make sure I put plenty of spirulina and plenty of hemp seeds in, and then I'm not hungry and I'm feeling satisfied on a smoothie. Whereas if those things aren't in a smoothie, like you're drinking a banana smoothie, or you're drinking like just a really light smoothie that doesn't have any nutrition in it, you're going to be hungry like an hour later. And it kind of feels weird because you're like, wait, I just had all those calories. Why am I hungry? It's because the nutrition is not in your smoothie.
Definitely. And our fourth tip for helping with cravings, and it's my favorite, and it's just making sure you're getting plenty of nourishment in the form of green foods like green juices and in the form of superfoods. So we talked about protein and fat. Obviously that's nourishment, but some of these green foods are so important to help with cravings. And we mentioned spirulina for the protein aspect, but spirulina actually also has a blood sugar balancing aspect. And when our blood sugar is constantly out of balance and we're constantly having to produce insulin and get our body back into balance, it continues to turn on our hunger hormones, which usually relate to us craving sugary foods. So things like spirulina will actually help balance that blood sugar. So it actually curbs cravings, not only because it's protein rich, but because of that too. And just the nourishment in general in things like green powders, like the Vita-Mineral Green. We talked about that last week, like a whole food green powder with the grasses and stuff. Like all those minerals, just again, they keep the body in balance. They help with our hormones, which are going to in turn help with our sugar cravings. So it's just, and I think our next one, like it's medicinal mushrooms and things like maca, all these other hormone balancing superfoods actually help keep those cravings at bay too.
So I want to share with you what I did this morning before I got on this call, Caitlin. I went downstairs and I had already had some coffee in the morning. So I opened up my cupboard, and I call my cupboard my apothecary, and it's right above my blender. So I have my blender here and my cupboard here. And when I'm making my coffee in the morning, like all my oils are in there, like my coconut oil, my MCT oil, my olive oil. But then on the next shelf, I have all my superfoods, and they're labeled in glass jars. So I can see exactly how much is in the jar. And then it's got like I bought a label maker, so it's got a label on it that says things like maca and Hoshu Wu, which we have a product called Glow that we love, and that's anti-aging, and it's really great for your skin and great for hormone balancing. And then I have some cacao powder in there. I have some hemp seeds. I have some different things. And I thought, well, I don't want to make more coffee because, I've had that already, but I kind of feel like I just want something. So I just threw like maca and Hoshu Wu and some cacao powder and some coconut oil and a little bit of soy lecithin, which is our non-GMO Health Force Nutritional soy lecithin, which is super great for the brain, and it coats your myelin sheaths, which help balance your nervous system. So if you're feeling edgy. So anyway, I just threw a bunch of that stuff in the blender and put a little stevia and blended it up, and that's what's in my cup right now. And I feel so good. It's making me feel really even keel, really balanced. I'm not hungry because I had worked out this morning, and sometimes after a workout, I'm like, well, I need something like a little bit more. So get these different supplements and put them in your cupboard. And if you're curious about what they all are, you should definitely join our spring course, because we go through every single one of these things I'm talking about, and we give you links in great detail. So we just love to let people know like all the amazing things that there are out there for your body. And then along the lines of, because you mentioned fiber, Caitlin, like getting your nourishment is getting like, so when it is your first meal, eating a big salad, even in the winter, because a big salad is going to, one, it has protein in it, and it has all the, like the amazing alkalinity of the greens, and it's a living raw food. And then like you're like, well, it's winter and I don't want just to have a salad. Well, then saute up your low carb veggies like your mushrooms and your onion and your zucchini and your spinach and maybe whatever other veggies you can find at the market, like broccoli or cauliflower, and then saute those up with your favorite spices like cumin and a little coconut oil or olive oil, and then throw that on top of your salad. And then that way you're getting the greens, but you're also feeling like you're getting something warm and cooked and concentrated. And that's where the fifth one comes in, which is our bread and our carb alternatives. So like one of my favorite lunches is to toast up that bagel that I said I have in my freezer, or one of my low carb, what we call a low carb flatbread, which is a recipe Caitlin and I made up. And it has lots of things like cabbage and shredded broccoli and things inside of it. And I'll toast that up, put a little bit of grass-fed butter on it. Or if you're vegan, you can put our special coconut. It's like a coconut oil, turmeric seasoned butter, which is like an herby butter. You can spread that all over the top. And eating that with your salad and your little bit of cooked veggies on top is so satisfying. And you will find you won't be hungry for hours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just want to touch on the fiber piece too, because I feel like that's what differentiates the way that we approach keto to the way that is like the mainstream keto. Because mainstream keto that's heavy in just fats and animal protein is devoid of fiber. So fiber not only helps with our satiety, but it helps with our digestive system. So if you are on a regular keto diet or you don't eat many veggies, like start now and start slow. Like we don't want to go from eating, 10 grams of fiber a day to then 50 grams that usually I feel like we do about 50 grams a day, because that's really gonna mess up with your gut for a couple days. So start slow on the fiber, but really it's a key important thing. And fiber also balances our blood sugar too, which is all related to our sugar cravings.
Yep. And that's why when we say net carbs, it means carbohydrates that are in a food. Like if I'm eating a piece of broccoli, maybe it has 7 carbohydrates in it. I'm just totally making this up, but there's 4 grams of fiber. So that means there's only 3 net carbs. But like you said, Caitlin, it's really important not to add what's called exogenous fiber. And you're going to see exogenous fiber in the form of inulin, which is spelled INULIN, psyllium, which we actually like to use, but not, in huge amounts. There's other things that are going to be in your food, like, what's the name of it? It's chicory. Chicory for me, inulin, chicory, and probably a few other things cause gas and bloating in my gut. And I'm always uncomfortable if I have those. So if you're buying a bar at the store and it says it has 15 or 20 grams of carbohydrates, but then it's like, oh, but it's got 10 grams of fiber. That is they're putting exogenous fiber, which means outside fiber, into your bar, and it's tricking you, because that's not what we're talking about when we talk about net carbs. We mean the original whole food minus the fiber that's in it. We're not saying go and start adding a ton of inulin into your food or buying food that has exogenous fiber, because it's a lie. It's not really going to balance your blood sugar in that way, and it's also just too many carbohydrates. And so I hope that's not confusing. Just eat whole foods and don't eat bars that have extra fiber added in. And you can tell by reading the label.
Exactly. And I feel like 90% of the keto bars, like the meal bars on the market today, are just full of these powdered fibers. So it's definitely trickery. And I feel like we get asked this a lot of like, is this healthy? Like it's making me feel satisfied, but yeah, pay attention to how your gut feels after something like that. And really, like if you're wanting one of those bars, like look for things that have chia seeds or flax seeds in them. Those are actually like fiber rich fiber.
Like those are real whole foods.
Fiber. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then let's get into, okay, so just the last thing on the carb alternatives is things like kelp noodles. We really promote eating kelp noodles with your meals, and we teach you how to soften the noodles in the course. But basically you can buy kelp noodles by the bag, either online or in places like Natural Grocers, Whole Food. If you're in Oregon, Market of Choice, I'm sure there's tons of other places you can find them. But they're basically noodles made out of kelp, and you just you marinate them and you soften them, and they're so great because they're 0 calories, 0 carbs, and they taste like glass noodles that you would get in an Asian restaurant, but without any of the carbohydrates, and they're super satisfying. And that's one of my go-tos when I'm eating a curry or eating anything like that that needs a little base to it, is the kelp noodles. And we also show you how to make your own tortillas. We have a yellow tortilla, so instead of corn tortilla, that we show you how to make. It has things like turmeric and psyllium and coconut flour. And when you have a bunch of those stacked in your freezer and they're ready to pop out and toast or dry fry in your skillet, that's going to be great for tacos or for anything that you're feeling like you really want to have. And we even teach you how to make your own what we call quesadillas with these kind of tortillas that are grain-free and low carb. And then we have you make your own either cashew or macadamia nut cheese. And then you can have your own quesadilla still. So you're really not missing out on anything. You just have to learn how to make it differently. And putting in the time and the energy to do it differently is going to change your entire life. I can attest to this because now all these things I'm talking about are easy peasy. There's always going to be a learning curve. Like just take, for example, if you ever learned to play guitar or you learned a language, it's hard at first. And now it's probably like, whoa, that's no big deal. So put the time and energy in now so that when you're 40 or 50 or 60, you've got this and you're still feeling fit and healthy and vibrant and amazing because you put in the time and the energy towards you. You gave yourself the time and love to learn how to make these things so that you'd be satisfied. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to say about anybody that's thinking, well, I don't have the time for that, or I don't want to. Well, then good luck getting through life because you need to learn how to feed yourself and nourish yourself in a really good way.
We're all about that. If you have time to Netflix and chill, you have time to make some tortillas.
And if you think, oh, I don't have energy for that, guess what? When you start eating a keto gone green diet and low carb and more greens and really healthy and balanced with fiber, you're suddenly on a Sunday afternoon going, wow, I have all this energy. Let me make some food. Whereas normally you're like, oh, I'm so tired. All I want to do is watch Netflix. But when you're feeding yourself well, you get 2 or 3 more hours of energy out of your day because you're not exhausted at 6 p.m.
Yeah. You're getting more satisfaction out of life. And when we created our 3-pillar system, we went back and forth between the pillar of satisfaction or no deprivation. And they just go so hand in hand because we really do feel like if you're feeling deprived, then you need to get in the kitchen because any one of these recipes is going to just totally change that around.
Yeah. And then, so the next thing we want to talk a little bit about is willpower, because some people try and willpower their way through life, and it's not maybe just with food, but with everything. And so there's a great book out called Willpower Doesn't Work, and I talk about this all the time. But the biggest one is to get rid of those tempting foods. If you've got a bunch of food in your house that's not working for you and you keep eating it, like, why do I keep eating these cookies? Well, it's not because you're a bad person. It's because they're in the house. Like, get rid of them. And if you have a husband or some kids or whoever that are still eating that food, get a combination lock and put a lock on the cupboard, and they have the key or the combination. And I know that sounds crazy, but do you want to spend the rest of your life feeling crappy and feeling bad about yourself? Like, it's such an easy solution. Either A, get rid of it, B, make it really hard to get to. That's it, A and B.
Yeah, it's true. You could be doing all of the 5 things to help reduce your cravings, and then you still have the thing in the house. Like, yeah, it's just not smart. And I had a friend, I made a big batch of cookies and I left them in the fridge thinking, I'm going to have these cookies for a couple of weeks, going to have one a day. And then my partner, who tends to eat a lot of cookies, came home and like literally half of them are gone. And I told a friend this and he was like, well, it's your fault. You're the one who left the cookies in the fridge. So like, even with healthy foods, we have to be mindful of like, limiting them or having strategies so that we don't eat them all, because it goes along too with mindful eating. Like, if a lot of us can mindlessly eat like in front of the TV, or if we're on the phone, or if we're distracted, like if I have my lunch in front of my computer and I'm working during it, usually 5 minutes goes by, I look down, it's gone, and I had no idea that I even ate it. Like, it's so mindless. So also keeping that in mind is being really mindful when you are eating the thing, is taking time to really chew your food, which is going to really help with your digestion and just with your satiety in general. So making sure that you're really paying attention and being mindful with what it is that you are eating.
Yeah, and the chewing thing, there's actually, they did a study and they did used peaches, and they had one group chew the peach like ridiculous amount of time, like 60 chews per bite, something that would be ridiculous for a peach. But the people that chewed more ate like way, I don't even think they finished the whole peach, or like, they weighed way less than the other group, maybe ate 2 peaches, and the first group only ate 1 peach because of the chewing. So don't underestimate chewing. It's great for your digestion and it causes less bloating, but it's also mentally satisfying. I mean, that chew factor. And you and I have both said, Caitlin, with smoothies, like, oh, I love smoothies, but I end up feeling like I really didn't have a meal. And the reason for that is because we didn't chew anything. And that's why I love salads and I love these breads that we make and I love this food. And yeah, I love paying attention. It made me sad to hear you say I looked down and it was gone, because I'm like, oh, that's so sad. Like, yeah, we're going to talk about mindfulness next week, but let's just spend more time, like when we're eating, just eating and not doing 10 things at once.
And it's satisfying, we eat with our eyes first. So it's satisfying really looking down, paying attention, taking every bite with, a lot of thought. Because if you take this time to make these meals, which, a lot of our people are on our coaching program, it does take more time. But then if you can actually sit down and enjoy, oh my gosh, look at what I made. These ingredients came from this place, they came from my local farmer, just really paying attention to that can even help with satiety, and just having appreciation can help with feeling satisfied as well.
Yeah, doing a little prayer, like, if you're not religious, doing a little moment of gratitude. I have potlucks here often at my house, and we always circle up, and we do this at our culinary school too, and our retreats. We circle up around the food, and then we just look at it for a minute and go, wow, look at all this beautiful food, like the colors. So making sure you're getting color in your food, like the red of the radish or the cherry tomato and the purple of the cabbage, and all the different colors, not just green, but like all the colors. And yeah, just taking that moment to just look at it with your eyes and actually like bless it with your eyes, like, because we're energetic beings. So when we bless it with our eyes, we're, even if we don't say one word out loud, we're actually putting like Masaru Emoto, who's this Japanese man, has proved with water that when you just bless it or love it or say a prayer to it without even speaking a word, that you actually change the structure of the water. So change the structure of your food. And if you can't get organic because you're eating out, or maybe you're eating food that's not as humanely raised or whatever in that moment, because that's all you've got, and you're at your mom's or your grandma's or your friend's house, just bless it first and give it all the energy that you would want to be in your body, the energy of nourishment and of love and of, just helping your body to be the best body that it can be, and helping your life to be the best it can be, because food should be number one for nourishment. Most of us eat it for entertainment, but like if we go back to the fact that food is really for us to keep going, right? So as hunter-gatherers, we would eat in order to live our lives. And now it's like, oh, how much food can I stuff in? So getting back to that, taking a minute to appreciate, because then you're going to eat less as well.
Yeah, and I think blessing the food too, if you have any anxiety around what you're eating, that is really just going to help your body digest it that much better. If we're really blessing it and thinking about the nourishment that it's going to give us, it's going to go in there, and our cells are listening too. The life force in the food is there, but our cells are also taking in that energy too, and they feel it when you are like, oh man, this is going to be so great for me. So I love that practice too. We do that every evening here, and it really just helps with feeling satisfied.
Yeah, with everything. Yeah, and then so like, since we're talking about it, food is very emotional. And I know you have a great story about like the first time you already talked about it a little bit, Caitlin, the first time you were able to eat something that was a bread alternative that wasn't gluten, like how emotional you felt about that. And I know for me, this was in 1997, so 23 years ago now, when I had to, because I had all these health problems, and the guy I was working with was a naturopath, and he said, no more bread, no more sugar, no more this, no more that. And I remember sitting on my couch and recording a video or recording like a little cassette tape to a friend who lived in New Zealand. And I just burst into tears, like, I can't have bread anymore. And so, like, honoring that part of yourself that's, knowing that this food has been there for me, whatever it is, the chocolate, the sugar, the cereal that you've always loved since you were a kid. And it served a purpose in its time. It served you well at that time. But now you're ready to be another person and you're strong enough to move on. But you need to honor that little girl or that little boy inside of you that still wants that comfort of that thing, whether it's beer for a lot of men or a glass of wine for a lot of women. And maybe you're not even ready to give those up yet. But if you are, just honoring that, like blessing it and honoring it, going, thank you for the time that you made me happy, for all those times when I could eat a chocolate chip cookie and feel so joyful about getting the cookie. And now I'm ready to let you go and move on and have your grieving process. And I think that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I have very similar story. And that's why I love that we can both teach this, because I think back, 10 years ago when I found out that, gluten was never going to touch my lips again, it was a moment of, just really deep sadness. But it was also really exciting for me because I had finally figured out what was actually going on in my body. But if I would have had a program like this back then, oh my gosh, or even just the recipes that you can find now, it's night and day. It definitely changes everything to know that, oh, I can't have this one thing anymore. It doesn't serve me. It's causing inflammation. It's not causing my hormones to be in balance, all of these things, but I can still have something similar. And the great thing about this too is they're satisfying for us, but they're also satisfying for families. These are such kid-friendly recipes too. Like, it doesn't mean that like, oh, I can't have my bread anymore, I'm gonna make this alternative, but the rest of my family is just gonna continue on. And that may be the case, but having family or friends around you try these recipes, you'll also notice that they feel satisfied too, and they can't believe how good that they taste.
Yeah, I have two roommates. One's 25 and one's in his 40s, and they both eat gluten, but they both love my breads and my bagels and my cookies. They're like, wow, yeah, they're like super excited and happy, even though there's no gluten and no sugar, and they're fine with the stevia if I put stevia in the cookies. So don't give people the benefit of the doubt and like let them try it. And if they don't like it, that's fine too. But at least, if you don't have to make 2 meals, great. And the less said, the better. And we go into this in our course, so I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but the less you say, oh, I hope you like this. Oh, it's kelp noodles. Oh, this might be weird to you. Don't say that. Just never apologize. Like, you just put a bunch of love and time into making these amazing foods for yourself. Share them. And then you might get to be where Caitlin and I are, where we show up at a party or an event with our food because we know that that's what we can eat. And everybody else is like, can I have some? We're like, shoot, I should have made it a double batch. So that might start to happen. And that's actually a good sign, because you're flipping people. You're flipping their whole diet paradigm. And that's really what we're here to do. What Kate and I are here to do is we're flipping the planet, flipping the diet paradigm, bringing more pure joy to the planet by changing up the way we look and think about food and other things. So that was kind of like what this podcast and what this course is about today, is change your mindset around what foods are satisfying to you and give yourself time. And that's the last thing I think we want to kind of finish with today is, and things are going to iterate. So, you might start out, I just think about me when I first got into raw foods. I was eating raw vegan pies for breakfast, but they still had bananas and dates, maple syrup, and even I was still eating oats at that time. And then one day my body was like, oh, oats make me sleepy. So the oats got cut. And then not much longer, like maybe the first year or two, I'm like, oh, the dates make me bloated. And I actually now I'm feeling sleepy after eating that. Or I'm gaining weight or whatever. And so that got cut. But it wasn't like all at once, cold turkey, I quit everything. So if you're thinking about quitting gluten or you're thinking about quitting something, switch over to something, like I said, good, better, best. It doesn't have to be like you have to eat like Caitlin and I do now. Because in 5 years, you might talk to us and we're doing something completely different. And, we've eliminated something that we right now think is the best food ever. So it's not about doing exactly what we're doing, but just start thinking about what foods you feel like are no longer serving you And that might be a good way to start. And then what food can you put in to replace that food that's going to make you feel satisfied?
Hmm. And you're listening to this for a reason. So those of you who don't have any sugar cravings and you have no health issues, like we're not speaking to you. We're speaking to the people who are ready to hear it. Like, do you wake up feeling sluggish? Do you have hormonal imbalances? Do you have extreme PMS, or your hair is falling out, or autoimmune, or any of the above? Like, this is for you. This is tools for you to start today to really, because I know that sugar cravings can completely take over your life. And if you don't feel satisfied in other areas, it will start to trickle down into the food that you're eating. So, yeah, this is for you.
Yep. And I'm really looking forward to talk to you guys next week about mindfulness, because that really plays a huge role in all the stuff we just talked about, like how meditation helps and how these different practices of like even listening to things and the words that we're using and choosing. So that's just like a little preview for next week. We're going to get really deep into our brain food and our mind food and all of that. And that has actually changed my life and changed the way I look at food as well. And so that's a huge piece. Not any one of these are any more important than the other. The third pillar is super important too.
Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we love you guys and we want to thank you for joining us today. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share them, whether this is on YouTube and Instagram or in the podcast. Like, give us a subscribe to this. You can rate and review it. You can ask questions, and we will be able to do some Q&A courses and different things, because we know that there's probably a lot of questions out there and we would love to be able to answer them. But if you don't tell us, we won't know what the questions are.
Yes. And if you're listening on Instagram Live, DM us with any questions. We're coming to you every week on this podcast and Instagram Live. So we'd love to answer any of those questions.
Awesome. Well, have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.